Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 143 of the Last Round Podcast. Thank you again for joining us as you do each and every week, or maybe this is your first time. Either way, we appreciate it, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Boxing Social, wherever you're at, however you're listening. We definitely appreciate it. Reoccurring guest, once again, Dougie Fischer, the Ring Magazine's editor-in-chief, joins us again on the Last Round. Thank you for joining us, Dougie.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back. Welcome back. So just jumping right into it, this past Saturday, the 4th of September, from the Headingley Rugby League Stadium, that's a mouthful, in Leeds on DAZN, Mauricio Lara and Josh Warrington in their rematch fight to a technical draw. I guess I say that lightly, fight to a technical draw. We were definitely looking forward to this fight, especially how the first one shaped up. There was a lot of, tension building up and especially with Lara getting the upset, being the underdog in the first one. Right. What was your take on the result, obviously? And then how did you think it was going to turn out before the actual draw happened?
Yeah, nobody asked me about my prediction on this fight. Maybe it's a bigger deal in England than it is here in the U.S., which would make sense, obviously. Warrington was on a good roll. He had been on a good run. He had actually abdicated his IBF title because he was headed for a showdown with Zhu Can, and he was hoping that matchup would result in being crowned the Ring Magazine champion. And that's a great goal. And it's, anytime I hear a fighter saying, I respect the belts, but I want to be a real champion. And by real champion, I mean Ring Magazine champion. I'm like, that fighter's going to have my attention, And I'll be honest, I kind of root for those guys too, regardless of where they're from or how they fight or whatever. If their goal is to be a Ring Magazine champion, it means they want to challenge themselves. And, if you glance at Josh Warrington's record, he's got real names on that record. And he looked like something really special. I think he beat Lee Selby and he beat Carl Frampton in back-to-back fights. So when you do that, you're making boss moves, and, he'd stayed active, and I like his style. You know what I mean? He's an aggressive dude. Decent boxer, but he lets his hands go. He's got pretty fast hands and furious combinations. The first fight against Lara was a shocker. He was supposed to roll over Lara, and I think he entered the fight really wanting to do that, even though he's not a knockout puncher. He went into that fight just thinking, okay, I'm going to overwhelm this guy. And then he tasted the power and he realized a little bit too late, like, oh man, I'm in with the guy who could fight, man. And Lara, to his credit, he really rose to the occasion. So he had an amazing story where he went from nobody to somebody, literally in one fight. And one of those overnight sensation things that only happens in boxing. So like in Ring Magazine's featherweight rankings, right now, Mauricio Lara is number 4. And Josh Warrington is number 5, So they're both top 5 featherweights. So when you have two guys, in the top 5 of their division facing each other, it's meaningful. And to me, this fight was all about Josh Warrington answering questions. Yeah, there's a lot of questions about him, like, were you a bit of a mirage? Are you really just a domestic level guy? Are you a badass in Europe? But once you start fighting folks from outside of the UK, or you maybe not all that, you know what I mean? Or did you overlook this dude and now you have your head screwed on straight? And if you have your head on straight, right, and you had a proper camp and your mind is right, was it the right move to go right into a rematch with a guy who may have your number? or does he have your number no matter what? You know what I mean? And unfortunately, we only got 6 minutes of action, 2 rounds, and the fight was over. And you can't complain too much with the result because that cut was nasty. Although somebody asked me about it in the mailbag, and which made me think about, have I seen a cut that bad and the fight be allowed to continue? And I thought, yeah, you know what? When Joseph Diaz Jr. Was challenging for the IBF junior lightweight title against Tevin Farmer, there was a head clash and there was a nasty cut in the same round, the second round, over the same eye, the left eye, and it looked equally bad. Maybe not quite as bad, but it like at the end of the second round, it was almost as bad as Mauricio Lara's cut, and they let it continue, and it got worse. I mean, it was disgusting, but you know what? He didn't let it bother him, and he fought his fight. And he won the fight. He actually won his first world title fighting with a gruesome gash over his left eye. So, I'm not complaining about the fight ending, but maybe it could have continued. I don't know. With that type of injury, I don't want to second guess it, because it was like under the brow and kind of like on the eyelid. And I'm not a doctor, but I've heard there are some nerves there to where if they get severed, the eye may never heal right. There might be muscles in the eye where the eye won't, operate correctly. And you never want to see somebody get maimed, whether they win or lose or whatever happens. So, I'm not going to second guess that stoppage. I think it was a just stoppage, but it was a disappointment because Warrington, I thought, looked really sharp. He was giving Lara his due respect, but he wasn't hesitant. He was still letting his hands go. I thought he landed the better punches in both rounds. I thought he landed more punches in both rounds. But towards the end of the second round, did look like Lara started to loosen up, get warmed up, kind of get into his rhythm, come forward, and he let his hands go a little bit. And you could tell there was some power behind it. And you could tell Warrington, he didn't freeze, but he tightened up a little bit, like, oh shit, here comes the storm. And so I was looking forward to seeing the storm. Whenever that would happen, maybe it would happen in the middle rounds, maybe it wouldn't happen until late in the fight, but I was anticipating that storm and wondering, okay, how does Josh handle the storm this time around? And we didn't get to see that. And a side note, kudos to the people of Leeds, the fans in Leeds, and Josh Warrington's fans and Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, because they said they announced 20,000 in that rugby stadium, and it looked like it. It didn't look like they were exaggerating at all. It looked like a massive crowd, and that's great to see. We need more nights like that in boxing. So I'm thinking. There will probably be a third match. If it happens, it'll probably land back in Leeds because that's where that makes economic sense. If Lara is willing to travel back to England, and why wouldn't he? That's probably the biggest fight out there for him is a third go around with Warrington, unless one of the featherweight title holders says, you're a badass, you're worthy of a title shot, and I'll grant you that title shot, be it, Lee Woods or Kid Galahad or Emmanuel Navarrete. Whoever would do that, I don't think anybody is because he's dangerous and he doesn't really have a big name, but if somebody were to do that, that's the only fight I could see for Lara that would be bigger and more, more meaningful and more lucrative than the third go around with Josh Warrington. But I think for it to be a big event, it does have to happen in Warrington's backyard.
Mike, what'd you think about the result, the technical draw?
It was a difficult one to kind of judge because, like Dougie said, I thought Josh started, bright. He was throwing, more punches, landing with more. But it looked like Lara would kind of adopt that style that we sometimes see from Canelo, where he's like, okay, I'm going to let you kind of touch me up. But when I touch you, it's going to be powerful and it's going to back you the fuck up. That kind of seems like the sort of thing that Lara went for. And Josh came out with a very, very high guard. Did you think, Dougie, he came out kind of...
Yeah.
like a Muay Thai
maybe
fighter.
a little
almost.
too high. I kept thinking like he's going to tap you to the body, dude.
Yeah.
But Warrington, at least for 6 minutes, he wasn't languishing in front of him. He wasn't taking it straight to Lara. It's like whenever Lara was in range, he'd let his hands go, and then he got out of position. You know, he got out of the way. And I thought that was a smart way to fight. You can't be scared, but punch on the fly as much as you could. And Warrington was trying to do that, and make your punches count. And I thought Warrington was doing a good job with that. He did, like I said, he did seem a little tight, but he never froze up. Of course, you know, the fight really hadn't begun in earnest. And really, I thought the fight would begin in earnest when Lara landed a flush power shot, be it to the head or the body. And I don't think he really did. Not yet, anyways.
Dougie, you mentioned overnight sensation, how, for example, in comparing it to this with Mauricio Lara, he got the win as the underdog, even though Warrington was the favorite. Right. And now he's getting, you know, bigger opportunities on bigger stages and so on and so forth. Who pops into your mind when you think about overnight sensations in the history of boxing that really capitalized on a win that kind of came out of nowhere and kept that momentum going?
Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah.
20 years ago, Manny Pacquiao was nobody. I mean, Manny Pacquiao was a former champ, right? But he had been a flyweight champion in Asia, right? He'd fought in the Philippines, and I think he'd ventured to Japan once or twice, right? And the only people who knew about Manny Pacquiao in America were people who, you know, were nerds reading Ring magazine. Before social media, it wasn't like you could go to YouTube and check out footage of you know, his flyweight title win. But I read about it, you know, and I saw his name in the Ring rankings, and when he won the WBC flyweight title. And I remember reading a very short report on how he lost the title and how he lost it on the scales before he got into the ring, and that how he was terribly weight drained. And the Ring's correspondent in Thailand said that he was upset, and there were a lot of other people, Filipino boxing people who were upset that the fight continued because his health was in jeopardy, and they were relieved that the visiting fighter from Thailand who took the title from him or who beat him, that he stopped him on a body shot and not a head shot because of how much weight he obviously lost. And I think the description that I read said that he stepped on the scales and he was like he passed out. Like he was either like really, really woozy, or he literally passed out trying to make weight and still couldn't make 112 pounds. So I remembered that. And I remembered reading about just the results of his fights at junior featherweight and noting that he went from 112 to 122, so a 10-pound jump. So he leapfrogged the bantamweight division, which made me think, okay, he's fighting in what is a natural weight class for him right now. And I knew about him because I'm here in Southern California, and he had just started training with Freddie Roach at the Wild Card Boxing Club. And I don't know if I'd seen him work out prior to the Layla Ledwaba title shot, but I had seen him around the gym, and I had heard Freddie Roach and Freddie Roach's assistant trainers rave about him. And Steve Kim, who had watched him spar a little bit and work the mitts with Freddie, told me that he was a dynamo. So I was looking forward to seeing him, but most people had no clue who he was when he stepped into that ring against Layla Ledwaba. I think it was on the undercard of an Oscar De La Hoya headline show at the MGM Grand. I think it was Oscar De La Hoya versus Javier Castillejo. So it was an HBO pay-per-view show, and Pacquiao got on the pay-per-view portion of that undercard because he was fighting this highly touted, very well-respected South African champion. And he did what he did and literally went from nobody to somebody. And he kept the momentum up. He was willing to challenge himself, because in his very next fight, which was in November of 2001, and I covered this fight as well. It took place in San Francisco. He fought another 122-pound title holder in the late Agapito Sanchez. So he showed us right away that you know, we didn't know if he was going to be a flash in the pan or not, but he let us know right away that he was willing to face those dangerous fighters in his weight class. And he was willing to take like back-to-back tough fights. And that would be a recurring theme. You know, a couple of years later in 2003, he beats Marco Antonio Barrera, and he follows that up with a fight against Juan Manuel Marquez, which is crazy. Nobody would do that. Nobody would do that. You win a title, it's like, okay, let me defend it against a mandatory or somebody kind of easy or whatever, not the guy in the division that everybody else avoids. He went straight to that guy. And he found out why the guy is avoided, right? You know, but then, you know, Pacquiao has that run in 2008 and 2009, 2010, where he's just fighting back to back badasses and taking those risks. And just recently he showed it again. You know, at age 40, he fights Keith Thurman. And yeah, he's out of the ring for a while, in part because of the pandemic. But when he comes back, the guy he chooses is Errol Spence. He literally goes for the number one rated welterweight out there. And, you know, and when Spence can't make it to the big dance, he accepts a guy that most elite fighters would avoid because he's difficult. He doesn't have a big name, but it's a big risk. And Pacquiao just doesn't care, you know. And that made him special. But before that victory against Lelo Ledwaba, he was unknown. He was only known by like super boxing geeks, which I was at that time. You know, people who followed Asian boxing, you know, people in the Philippines, really, I guess people in the Philippines, Thailand, and Japan, you know, knew who Manny Pacquiao was. And that was about it.
So kind of real quick to top off the Lara and Warrington, assuming when that cut heals, do you think they fight immediately after, sometime maybe in the first quarter of next year?
Yeah. I think Warrington will fight again at least once before the year is out. You know, maybe in October or November, depending on, you know, what weight class he wants to fight at. I know Eddie Hearn had mentioned, you know, the possibility of him going to junior lightweight. Although I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think Warrington struggles to make 126 pounds. I mean, whenever he weighs in at like 125 and a half, you know, 125 and some change, you know. But it depends on, I think, the level of the opponent and the weight class, and, you know, whether or not he's his own main event or if Eddie puts him on another sort of like high profile undercard or whatever. And we'll just have to see what happens. But I definitely think Warrington will be back before the end of the year. And yeah, probably if we see Lara, be late this year or, you know, in the first quarter of next year. But I do think we're going to get that fight. I don't see any other featherweight of note saying, "Hey, let's fight Mauricio," because I just, you know, he showed who he was in those 9 rounds in the first fight against Warrington, right. And that's a badass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's definitely high risk, low reward. That's how they're looking at him. Also on the card, Katie Taylor retains her WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO lightweight world titles that she gets the unanimous decision win over 10 rounds against Jennifer Hahn. What do you think about Katie Taylor's performance, Dougie?
Typical Katie Taylor. She's got hands. She moves them. She seems to be, I mean, she's 35 now. She seems to be a little flatter on her feet. You know, I remember watching her when she was 6-0, 7-0, 8-0, and really marveling at her footwork as much as her hands, you know. She's still got hands, but it seems like the footwork she doesn't move as much as she used to move. And I think she's slowing down a little bit, you know, but maybe she didn't need to, you know, maybe she didn't need to show all her wares against Hahn, you know, who'd been inactive, you know, had a child recently, and, you know, she was world-class at featherweight, you know, so maybe she just, you know, she didn't need her A game. Her B or C game was enough. But I do kind of wonder if she's plateaued. I do kind of wonder if she's peaked athletically, or maybe if her peak was a couple years ago. I don't know. I think the best I've seen her, the hardest I've seen her fight was the first Person fight. And maybe the best I've seen from her might be the rematch with Person. Still a tough fight. but she really had to put it all together because Person is such a badass, such an elite level fighter, and so experienced. But I do think if we're going to have like female super fights involving Katie Taylor, I think they have to happen now. I think there's a risk of her dying on the vine a little bit if the various promoters wait on making like a Amanda Serrano fight or a rematch with Jessica McCaskill. You know what I mean? If they wait too long on that, like if these fights don't happen until late next year or the year after, I don't think Katie's going to be the same. You know, so if they want to get the best, if they want the best version of Katie they can get, I think they need to make these fights. And I don't know why they would wait either. Cause I got to be honest with you. I didn't think Amanda Serrano looked that. I mean, she obviously she got the job done on that Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley undercard, but she didn't blow me away, you know? And I think in part is because of the level of the opponent. The opponent, again, you know, just like with Katie, it was somebody stepping up in weight, right? And this young lady from Mexico was a belt holder. Mercado, I think was her last name. Mm-hmm. She was a belt holder, but she really wasn't that experienced and she wasn't that good. I mean, she was game and she did what she had to do to get through 10 rounds. Right. But, she didn't have enough to bring out Serrano's best. And, yeah, I wasn't blown away. I wasn't blown away by Serrano's performance and I wasn't blown away by Katie Taylor's most recent performance. And I really think that all fighters of all levels, but especially elite fighters, I think they need a reason to train and they need to be in with an opponent they really respect it if they're going to show their best. Okay. It's the rare fighter that brings his or her A game to any level of opponent, right? If that's a rare fighter, you know, that's a very special fighter. Most fighters, they do sort of fight to the level of their opposition, even if they're like pound for pound rated. And Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano definitely pound for pound rated. But I think, you know, they're both mature. They've both been around a long time. There's a lot of wear and tear. Katie, in part because of her extensive amateur background. Serrano just has a buttload of fights. You know what I mean? What's her record? 42, 1-1. I mean, she got a lot of fights. So, you know, they're going to hit the ceiling if they haven't already hit the ceiling. So they, you know, the promoters, Eddie Hearn and Luda Bella and their management, they need to come together and make that fight. And if that fight, Taylor Serrano can't be made, I think Serrano needs to go after somebody else, you know, go after Michaela Mayer. Okay. You know, Serrano is the best featherweight out there. I think Michaela Mayer is the best junior lightweight out there. And she has a profile, right? She's fighting on ESPN. She's promoted by Top Rank. Let's make that fight. I never hear anyone talk about that fight, but why not? Why not make that? Mayer can fight. You know, she's got a chip on her shoulder too. Let's make that fight. You know, if the Katie Taylor, everybody can't chase Katie. Everybody calls out Katie, no matter what their weight class. I'm just kind of like, okay, you know, there's got to be somebody close to your weight class that you can fight or whatever that is worthy. And I think Michaela is definitely worthy for Serrano. And if Taylor fights McCaskill, hopefully that doesn't get all caught up in money and, you know, what weight it's going to be at because Taylor's a lightweight and McCaskill's now fighting at welterweight. Either come to a reasonable catch weight, like fight at 140, or just, you know, have Taylor step all the way up, whatever, weigh what you weigh and challenge for the undisputed welterweight title, you know, chase glory. But we need those fights to happen, and women's boxing needs it too. And I think the sport has reached a place where the promoters involved and the networks, the platforms involved, they would play it up. They'd make a big deal out of it. You know, these would be real championship fights, fights for all the belts or, you know, the Ring Magazine title, whatever floats your boat. But they need to happen.
So, Mike, go ahead and tell Dougie what you think about a potential matchup between Serrano and Katie Taylor, and then we'll have Dougie give his take.
Well, originally I would have said, you know, I think Taylor would have won, but after watching that performance and then thinking back to the recent performances against Jonas and the two against Pursoon, I kind of agree with what you were saying. I think her feet have slowed down, and now she gets kind of caught in more of, just kind of standing and banging in the middle of the ring like she did against Pursoon and against Jonas. Because years ago she would have pieced up Tessa Jonas. She wasn't a very good fighter, I don't think, and I think Katie Taylor would have made easy work of her years ago. So I do wonder now, after watching that performance, originally I would have said that she would have beaten Serrano quite easily, but Serrano's heavy-handed, and if she fights like she did against Pursoon, and like you just said though, with that being the biggest fight, is she going to go in there with a different mentality? Is she going to go in there train differently? Is she going to think about the footwork and use that more?
Yeah, you gotta give these fighters, I don't care what their level, you gotta give them a reason to train, and you gotta stoke that fire in the belly. I would imagine that both Serrano and Taylor would bring their A game. They would be very dialed in for that fight, and they would, if it looks like they're slowing down, they would kind of recapture some of their younger form for that fight. But it's an even fight. If it's not an even fight, it's like, 55-45, slightly in favor of Taylor. And I would make Taylor a slight favorite just because she's the lightweight, and Serrano is really a featherweight, and Taylor is used to fighting really strong women like Pursoon. Delphine Pursoon she's a killer. She puts mad pressure on her opponents. She's got hands, and she's like impervious to pain. Nothing deters her. And Taylor has gone 20 rounds with her, and I know Serrano's got great experience too, but I don't know if she's got experience against someone like that. Right. And Taylor showed in the rematch that, when she has to, she can still stick and move a little bit. She's still got that footwork, but it's I'll tell you what, an X factor in that fight, which I've never seen a female fighter really attack Taylor's rib cage, really go to the body. And I think Serrano, she's got that body attack down. She's got the body punches, body selection. That would be interesting if she could get to Taylor's body, and what would the result of that be? I think she would need to, as a matter of fact. I don't think Serrano's power, her headshots, would be enough to turn back or to really impose her will on Taylor. I think she'd need to beat her up to the body.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hopefully we see that potential fight between Serrano and Katie Taylor sometime in the next year or so. Also on the card, Maxie Hughes, 24-5-2, gets the 12-round unanimous decision win over Giovanni Straffon. I hope I pronounced that right. This was for the IBO lightweight title. What did you think about Hughes' unanimous decision win, Dougie?
I still look at him as like a domestic level guy. He's one of the better British lightweights out there. I'm thinking about the ring ratings. We just had every Sunday we have like our kind of email chain where we all go back and forth about, who's breaking into the rankings or who's moving or who's dropping or whatever. And I don't think anybody suggested him to crack into the top 10. And I would agree with that. I think he's still outside of being a legitimate lightweight contender, but I heard Eddie Hearn mention him, or maybe he himself mentioned himself as a potential challenger for Devin Haney. And I wouldn't mind seeing that. You know what I mean? I don't think Haney's got anything else going on right now. So you might as well, you know what I mean? If somebody wants to fight you, and they're not going to ask for Fort Knox, and they're not going to be difficult in the negotiations, and they just want that opportunity to get into the ring. Why not? I mean, he's capable. He's definitely capable. And he could get better depending upon how he's moved and the quality of his opposition. He might get better the tougher the opposition gets. Right now, it seems like a talent like Haney is a step too far, but they got to fight the fights.
Mike, what do you think about Hughes' win and a potential matchup with a Devin Haney?
just one of those, feel good, Cinderella stories, like everyone was saying the underdog, somebody that, has really gone in there as the B-side, but just kept winning. He's supposed to lose to John O'Carroll, beat him, went over to Dubai, beat somebody out there, kept winning. I think he was on like a 4 or 5, fight win streak. And then now, obviously, listening to some of the interviews, it looks like they're going to try and, roll him out as the A-side for a little while. It's kind of funny to see them actually kind of recognizing the IBO as a world championship after all the stuff people have been saying about the WBA, the WBO, and we need to bin the belts. And then the IBO comes in there as, the 5th or 6th, sanctioning body that they're like, oh, he's a world champion. I'm thinking, you just kicking off the last few weeks about,
right,
we have too many, and now you're recognizing this one that no one recognizes.
That's boxing fans. That's right. Boxing. Yeah.
It was good for him, just the fact of, what he's kind of achieved. Probably got to the point where he's probably thinking he's just going to kind of be a journeyman or a gatekeeper, and then kind of takes those chances. And they were talking about him fighting Devin Haney. I believe if Jojo Diaz fight couldn't be made, he may step in. Yeah. So fighting over in Las Vegas or something like that, and roll back 2 years, and he's fighting these nobodies as a B-side. So just kind of shows if you get the right trainer like he did. He's training with Josh Warrington's father. Just shows you what can happen when you kind of click together.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see how his career progresses going forward. Also on the card, Conor Brand gets the 10-round unanimous decision win over Adrian Granados for the WBA Continental Welterweight title. What did you think about Ben's performance, Dougie?
I don't want to say it was flat. It was just it was kind of one-dimensional. It was kind of one-dimensional. It was doing the same thing over and over. I think he had an image of Adrian Granados in his mind of a more aggressive fighter, the kind of gatekeeper that wants to try to take your heart. And I think Granados was that guy some years ago, but I definitely think Granados' tour through the PBC took its toll. I mean, I think he got paid well. He was in some high profile fights. I still think he deserved the decision against Adrian Broner, but those type of distance fights, getting in there with guys like Sean Porter, man, that's going to take some years off you. And the thing about Granados is that he was in tough fights when he was nobody. He was in tough fights when he was fighting 6-rounders and 8-rounders. I mean, he was brought in as somebody to test Frankie Gomez when Gomez was like 19, 20 years old and just this little beast of a prospect out of East LA. And Granados gave him hell. I mean, they went to war in an 8-rounder, you know what I mean? And I think the only difference in that fight was that Gomez dropped Granados, but Granados got up and fought his ass off, and he was that guy. You would go in there and, at some point, I think, he was resigned to the fact that he's not going to get the benefit of the doubt in close decisions, and, maybe, didn't have the best of luck in terms of his management or whatever. But he was, for many years, he fit that role as like a reliable gatekeeper in that he could shock somebody like Amir Imam, you know what I mean? Who everybody was thinking was going to be the next top contender, a future title holder at 140 pounds, and he could let us know if, somebody like Adrian Broner is still truly world-class or not, or if he's just a name now who's just really tough, But regardless, win, lose, draw, whatever, you have that many, you fight that level of opposition, you get that much wear and tear. If you're going to last, and I think he's realized that, you can't go into every fight with the whole blood and guts mentality. And so he used his experience in the Conor Ben fight really to extend Ben, to be pesky in there, land his shots, his right hands, and land his counter punches when he saw fit, but otherwise play the matador, don't be the bull. And he did. He was the matador, and you're not going to win, especially in England. You're not going to win, fighting like that. But Ben didn't look like the most capable bull. I kept thinking like he's a pitcher throwing us the same fastball over and over again. And fastball being his right hand. And I won't say that watching the fight, like it became monotonous, but I kind of felt like I was seeing the same round over and over again. And I sort of adjusted my opinion of Ben, because Ben has been on a nice run prior to this fight. And I was thinking, he could be a real contender. He's not a legitimate contender, right? He's not in Ring Magazine's welterweight top 10, but I was thinking, in a couple of fights, maybe he could be. And I had thought about some interesting fights for him, because there's sort of like a fringe contender, trains out here in Southern California named Blair Cobbs, who's got a real bright personality. He's a Golden Boy fighter, so he fights on DAZN, just like Eddie Hearn's fighters. I thought, I was thinking, that's kind of a makeable fight, and it would be interesting because Conor is so headstrong and he's got heavy hands and a pretty good foundation. And Blair the Flair, he's a little more versatile. He's kind of light on his feet, herky-jerky kind of rhythm, but he's also really tight and kind of vulnerable, and he gets caught. And when he gets caught, he gets hurt. And he gets dropped, but he pops back up, and he's got fast hands, and he's got some power too. And I was like, oh, that's a good fight, and that's a fight I was thinking that would make Conor look really good. Prior to the Granados fight, I was thinking, oh, Conor would definitely beat Blair Cobbs. And now I'm thinking, oh, I don't know about that. Maybe Blair beats Conor. I was thinking while I was watching Conor kind of go through the motions against Granados, I'm like, Blair's a big welterweight, tall, rangy. He can switch hit. He's got that bounce on his, he's more versatile. I was thinking, and he's really fast, and I'm thinking, he may have too much versatility, too much speed and versatility for Conor. He might wind up making Conor look silly. I don't know. Like I say, they got to fight the fights, but Conor's performance was one of those fights where I kind of reassessed him a little bit and I slowed it down. I slowed my roll on him. I'm not, if there's a hype train for Conor Ben, I'm not on it. I wasn't on it to begin with, but I was thinking about stepping on it. And then I'm like, after this fight, I'm like, I wish the kid well. I like him. I was a huge fan of his father. Now I'm back to sort of viewing him as a project.
Mike, what did you think about Conor Ben's performance?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Dougie, really. I think I said before, I always thought he was very one-dimensional. You could kind of see that, you're kind of used to being like the bigger, stronger fighter, kind of brawls a lot, and then carefully selected opponents that normally come forward. And I think, like Dougie said, that we kind of expected that from Granados. And when Granados decided, like, hell no, maybe he felt the power early on, was like, I'm just going to dance for 12 rounds. Which kind of, took the sting out of the fight. And, Ben was trying to call him on, and, it kind of made the fight kind of boring after a while, because you could just kind of see that Granados just wasn't gonna get stuck in the trenches with him, was going to fight it, and he just wanted to survive, and dance off with another payday later down the line. So, yeah, I think they'll probably do the same thing with Ben for a while. Probably just try and, they wanted the Broner fight, and Broner's, would either stand and fight or maybe do like he did with Pacquiao and dance around the ring. But I just don't see it. I think it's a hard division. I don't think that Ben's 23, 24. We've got Virgil Ortiz and Jaron Ennis. I think both of those would whip him pretty easy. So I don't see him getting a world title unless he manages to buy one before they do somehow. The IBO is a world title now. So maybe
IBO, hey, that's real now. We recognize the IBO now. It's all good.
Yeah, so you never know. Crazier things have happened in boxing. So
we might bring back the IBA.
Oh man, you never know.
Remember the IBA?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Remember Ricky Hatton used to fly. There was WBF.
Oh, WBU.
WBU. There you go.
WBU. Yeah.
He was proud of that for many years.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
WBU was proud of him.
Right. Yeah.
I think WBU was the last time I heard about it, when I really kind of paid attention, was Hank Lundy had fought for it against he's I don't even know if he's still fighting, but John Delperdang And it was like a fight like in Ohio or something. But I remember that Delperdang trained like locally around here. So I went to go see him train because he was like not too far. And he was happy, you know, it was a big fight because Lundy, I think, had just the 2 fights before was against Crawford. He got beat by Crawford. So he had some name recognition. But I remember that was the last time, that was a couple of years ago, I heard about the WBU. So I don't know where it's at right now, but who knows? Who knows? Moving on that card, Hope Price gets the second round TKO over Zahid Hussein, and Ebony Bridges improves to 7-1 with the victory over Malice Gangloff. I hope I pronounced that right. Dougie, what do you think about Bridges' performance and her whole personality?
I like her personality. I know who she is. You know what I mean? She's very popular. She moves the needle. We're going to have an article by Thomas Gerbazy in the Next Ring magazine about her. I'm looking forward to reading it and learning more about her. But, I've seen highlights of some of her past fights. She comes to fight. She's from Australia, right?
Right.
She's kind of got that Aussie attitude, which is like, go hard or go home. You know, she brings it. And she's good looking, and she knows how to leverage that. Make it work for her, and make it part of her image and part of her marketing. But bottom line, you got to be able to fight, and it looks like she can fight. Even though she's only got 8 fights or whatever. And she'll learn. I mean, she'll get better. But I didn't see this fight, so I can't really critique her performance on this bout yet. I will check it out eventually. I mean, I know it's I got the zone, so I got all these fights on demand. When I get a little bit of extra time, I'll go and check them out. Eat lunch and catch up on some boxing as I do. But
right,
yeah, I've been covering boxing a long time, and you go through that phase as a fan where you have to watch everything. Like, I was like that in the late 80s and early 90s, really throughout the 90s. Like, if there was any boxing on any level, on any network, I had to see it. In part because in those days, you couldn't catch it. There was no such thing as DVR. If you weren't there, you couldn't, it was difficult to set like a VCR if you had one or whatever. And so if you missed something, it was a long time till you got a chance to see it. And usually you'd have to contact these collectors who videotaped everything.
Yeah, tape collectors.
In the back of the tape collectors in the back of the magazines. They'd have an address, and they say, make out a money order, send it to me, and Scout's honor, I will put these VHS tapes in the mail so you can watch these fights that you miss. And I did that. And I used to be real excited when I'd get them in the mail. They would put old fights on there, like Joe Louis fights or Carlos Monzon fights or Roberto Duran fights or whatever. But I would also, if I missed a USA Tuesday night fights or ESPN's Friday night fights or whatever, I would send off for those VHS tapes and I would catch up, I've been full-time, a boxing writer and now, an editor for more than 20 years. So it's like, I'm kind of past the point on having to watch every fight live. So if there's some 6-rounder at the start of a card, because these days, especially with streaming platforms, ESPN Plus and DAZN, they'll literally show you every fight on the card. And I'm kind of like, nah, I don't need to see that. If I hear it's something good, or if this prospect is something really special, then I'll check it out later, and it might be a couple days later. It might be a couple weeks later. But I'm kind of past the days of like literally spending all day, in front of the TV or in front of the computer or in front of the laptop watching every bout. So no disrespect to Ebony. I will catch that fight. And, the other, and, all the fights that I missed from this weekend, I will at least see like the main, like the co-featured bouts, probably before the end of this week. But as of Tuesday, coming off of a holiday weekend, no, there is boxing that I missed, Yeah. Like I told you, I missed the Fox card, the PBC on Fox card That was on Sunday. I which is weird because I actually wanted to watch it. I actually wanted to see the main event, and I made a mental note of it. And I even posted like on ringtv.com the final bout sheet with the weights and everything. Like, okay, and I'm looking at the bout sheet saying, oh, I might catch that one on FS1. And I'm looking forward to that. I want to see what this guy looks like. And then Sunday rolls around, and I go out and I walk my dog, and I said, I think I'm going to go work out or whatever. And I go and I work out, have a great workout and all, and come in, take a shower, and then I eat. And then I get on my phone. And I'm seeing people tweeting about, or I'm just seeing the result. I'm seeing in my email, like the press release from Fox, or from the PBC. I'm like, oh, I missed it. But it was out of my head. Yeah. Like I had this like really nice Sunday thinking like, yeah, there's no boxing this weekend, which is nuts. Literally the day before I myself posted up the final bout sheet, but that's what happens when you get older.
It happens.
I'm 51, I'm 51 and I've been covering boxing for full time for 21 years. And really kind of been covering it and writing about it since the mid 90s. So it's like, I've definitely seen my share of boxing, and I don't always, it's got to, if I'm really, obviously if I'm not on duty as the editor or I'm not covering it or whatever, I may not watch the entire card live, so.
Right. Yeah. So you touched on Dougie this past Sunday, the 5th of September from the Armory in Minneapolis, Minnesota on Fox. Jesus Alejandro Ramos gets the 10-round unanimous decision win over Brian Mendoza. Ramos had some quotes that Swanson or PBC released in a press email following the fight. It looks like Mendoza had some pretty early success in the early rounds, and then Ramos said in a quote, "I have to go back and look at the tape and see what I did wrong, but I fought with a lot of energy. He caught me with some good punches early on, so I knew I was going to have to take my time with him." So it looks like, maybe the first half of the fight, Mendoza kind of got the best of him a little bit, but then Ramos kind of found his stride and ended up getting the victory.
It was supposed to be a solid matchup. I think Ramos was the favorite though, right? I don't know what the official odds were, but I mean, he was the favorite. He has a little more juice going into that matchup, but Mendoza was definitely viewed as a solid opponent. That's why, I did want to see that fight. I didn't, no disrespect to PBC, Fox, Ramos, or Mendoza. I will watch it. But Ramos, it's a tough division. You guys had mentioned, just like for Conor Benn, it's a tough division to really break in as a legitimate contender. Ramos seems to be headed in the right direction. He's a prospect, but he's not like a young gun like Virgil Ortiz Jr. or Jaron Ennis. He's not a prospect turned contender. Like those guys like Ennis and Ortiz, they're like prospect age, or, and Ortiz, he just now fought his 18th pro bout or whatever, but given the quality of his opposition and just his performances, and the same thing with Ennis, who has a lot more fights because he was fighting every month at one point, right. Early in his career, and really fighting off TV, kind of in the dark, as we used to say. But it's clear they're legitimate. They're top 10. They are legitimate top 10, and they seem to be headed into the top 5. And those are guys that you would say you would give them a shot, against any of the title holders, right? Or even some of the, the grizzled veterans. You would actually give them a shot because of their talent, or like in Virgil Ortiz's case, because of his power. They both seem to have good heads on their shoulders. Ramos is not in that class. You know what I mean? I don't, maybe I need to see this fight to know for sure, but I don't think so. I don't think, we wouldn't give him a shot against any of the title holders or, a legitimate top 5 welterweight, but he does seem to be headed in the right direction.
Right.
And he's got youth on his side.
Yeah. That's always good.
No rush. Yeah.
That's always good. This upcoming weekend, the Friday, the 10th of September, from the Casino del Sol in Tucson, Arizona, on ESPN Plus. It's been getting a lot of controversy the last week or so. Oscar Valdez puts up his WBC super featherweight world title against Robson Consunciao. Is that how you pronounce it, Dougie?
Don't ask me. I'm terrible with Brazilian names. That guy's Brazilian, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, my Portuguese sucks.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Obviously our listeners, being the hardcore boxing fans that they are, at least most of them, Valdez was obviously announced to be he tested positive for phentermine recently. So there was the fight was in jeopardy, and then the WBC came in, made a ruling, and the tribal commission in Arizona made a ruling. So the fight is proceeding. What was your take when you heard that news? Did you think the fight was going to be called off?
At first I did. Yeah. Not when I heard it was a diuretic. Well, actually, when I heard it was a stimulant, I was like, that's a performance enhancer. You know what I mean? It's on VADA's ban list, and VADA's ban list is the most comprehensive out there. And they don't. One thing VADA does doesn't do that commissions do, and that UCAD does, and WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency. They don't have an out-of-competition ban list and an in-competition ban list. They don't differentiate. They don't say, well, you can put whatever you want into your body, when you're not in training for a fight. But then when you're training for a fight, you can't put this into your body, or you can't put this into your body this close to the fight. They're kind of like, if it's doing something unnatural that is going to make you train harder or recover faster, or add mass to your bones and your muscles or whatever, you know what I mean? If it's going to do something, if it's going to enhance you, it shouldn't be allowed, right? They're going to test for it. It's going to ban. I shouldn't say it shouldn't be allowed, because VADA is a testing organization. They are just there to test to see what is in the fighter's system, and they test for more substances than anybody else, and their standards are higher. Like, it's their testing is hypersensitive. It's, down to the microgram, down to the picogram, you know what I mean? So whatever's in your body, it's most likely going to be detected by a VADA test. It wouldn't be detected maybe by USADA. It may not be detected by UCAD. It may not be detected, definitely probably not going to be detected by a state commission test, right? So they're the highest standard, but they're not a governing body. They're not, they just say, hey, this is what was in your system, and this popped up because this is something we test for because it's on our ban list. So, and then they let you know, and the promotion know, and the commission know. And then it's up to the promoters to decide what they want to do. The sanctioning body, if it's being sanctioned as a title bout, they get to decide how they're going to deal with it, and the commission gets to decide how they would deal with it. I know a lot of state commissions would not license a fighter who tested positive for this, just to avoid the liability, right, in case his opponent got hurt. But the tribal commission is the commission that has authority for this venue. It's on sovereign land, I guess, and they decided to let it go. But I thought the right choice would be for Valdez not to fight. If I was, Valdez kind of went to his management, and his management went to the legal team headed up by Pat English. And they, they were like, okay, herbal tea. He took an herbal tea, and that's where this comes from. And it was an accident. And, we've been testing for performance enhancing drugs for a long time. And I don't think that excuse really works. You know what I mean? That, like, I didn't know, even if it's true, it's just like, everybody knows you're supposed to know now, especially in the last, 3 or 4 years, and the thing is when you sign up for VADA, right on that, when you become when you enter the VADA program, you have to fill out paperwork, and part of that paperwork, they ask you to list anything you're taking in competition, out of competition. They talk about dietary supplements, vitamins, anything, over-the-counter pharmaceuticals. If you take something for your sinuses, right? Whatever it is, anything. They say, you got to tell us what it is. So you need to do that. And if you put down, if you put down everything, maybe they might say, hey, you better be careful with this shit. It's over the counter, and they may say on the label 100% natural, but that's bullshit, right? They might tell you, if you yourself are not sure, right? You yourself are taking some kind of vitamin, some kind of supplement that says, energy, right? And you take it, athlete fuel or whatever, some kind of powder or whatever it is. And you feel it. You're an athlete, right? You're working out and you're feeling like, fuck, I like it. When I drink that shit, I'm ready to fucking go. You know what I mean? I'm doing 20 rounds on the bag and I'm feeling great, So you yourself are kind of like, I really wonder what is that shit, You can even ask, if they don't know off the top of their head, if they don't know from just a reputation of that company or that brand or whatever, that supplement, you can have it tested. They can tell you, okay, you put it, send it to this lab, send you an ad, send it to this lab and we'll test it and we'll find out. We'll run it through the testing process and see if any of these banned substances come out. And they do that free of charge. I've been told nobody's ever taken them up on that.
Oh, wow.
No one's ever done it, but they do this. And maybe that's just ignorance. They don't know. They don't read the fine print. But when you do sign up for the VADA program, there's a lot of literature, and you guys could go to the VADA website. I think it's vada-testing.org. And you can go to where it says forms or documents or whatever. And, they're PDF files. You can download them, the things that the fighter fills out. And they have a little document saying basically a warning on dietary supplements, where they're saying man, be careful, literally to avoid any messy situation, don't take them. Don't take vitamins. Don't take these over-the-counter stuff, during your training. If you do take them and you really feel you need to take them, better let us know. And we should have them tested, But they even say in that document, they say that, even if it's contamination, if you pop, you pop. If you test positive, you test positive. It's not going to absolve you from that positive test or whatever. So fighters got to get hip, man. If they're, especially with VADA. I mean, I think with these other, I hate to say it, but with these other testing, yeah, they can get away with elevated testosterone levels. They can get away with HGH and blood doping methods and all. There's a lot they can get away with. If they want to let the public know that they're clean athletes, they need to undergo VADA testing. And if they want to really be above suspicion, and nobody's above suspicion, they need to enter into a 24/7, year-round VADA testing program. Thing is that costs money. Yeah. You know what I mean? Who has the money to do that? So, I mean, it's a difficult situation. One thing I don't like is I don't like how people fans just used it as an excuse to attack Eddie Reynoso and Canelo, which is always in season, right? But they're like, oh, he's running a dirty gym or a dirty program. And it's like, if you're going to say that about Eddie Reynoso, basically you have to say that about every trainer out there. Mm-hmm. You really do. I don't think there's a gym. I don't think there's a well-known gym or a well-known trainer in the last 10 years who hasn't had at least somebody pop dirty. Mm-hmm. Any trainer will tell you they've got that fighter for the time they're in the gym. That fighter belongs to them. When they're in the gym, in camp, that fighter belongs to them. When they leave the gym, that fighter can get into whatever the fuck they want to get into, whether it's performance-enhancing drugs, whether it's recreational drugs, whether it's sex, whether it's whatever, eating terrible, you know what I mean? Just going off the rails with their diet, that's on the fighter. That shouldn't be on the trainer. The liability should be with the individual. That individual is an adult. That individual is a professional athlete. So that individual has to be responsible for what goes into their body, even if they were unaware that it was contaminated or whatever. But I honestly think the best way to handle this would have been for Oscar Valdez. If he really says it, I mean, I think it's fishy, but let's say, hey, I didn't know. I took this tea. Maybe it was in this tea, but whatever. There should be an apology for anyone who bought tickets, who was looking forward to him fighting. Apologize to your fans. Apologize to your team, and say, I'm going to undergo stringent testing for the next 3 to 6 months. And at the end of that period, I will fight again. I'll see you guys then. And then for Top Rank to move that card. I mean, that card was in Tucson because Valdez has history there. He lived there for a while, right? But their co-featured bout, the Nakatani Acosta fight, is a hell of a fight. That's a WBO flyweight title bout to me. And honestly, I was more into that than Valdez's fight. I'm more into that matchup. I am. I'm looking forward to the flyweight fight. I really am. That's the fight I want to see. They, move that to a ballroom in Vegas, whatever. Just move it somewhere and, or keep it in Tucson if the venue wants to keep it, and go forward with that. It's still good TV. That's still a good main event, and the undercard's pretty decent. And I think that would be the way to go. But the way it played out, everybody's down on boxing. Everybody hates Oscar Valdez. Everybody's throwing shade at Eddie Reynoso and at Canelo, because why not? He's Canelo. We all love to hate him. So let's do that. And everyone hates the WBC, right? So everyone's bitter. Everyone's mad at Top Rank. Their own commentators, their boxer commentators, are down on Oscar Valdez. They're just going to rip the shit out of him during the broadcast. I mean, it's a shit show, really. It sucks. And had it been handled a different way, had Valdez owned up like, oh shit, he could still say, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it, but just own up to it. Like, all right, this is a surprise to me. I'm a clean athlete. That's why I do VADA testing. That's why we pay for this shit. Okay. They found this. Now I know. Oh my God. I'm educated now. I'm enlightened. I've seen the light. I'm going to have even more testing. Okay. I'm going to be out. Whether you get a suspension or not, suspend yourself. Say, okay, I'm out. I'm going to keep training. We're going to reschedule this fight or I'm going to fight again later in the year, hopefully. But between now and then, I'm going to have random drug testing. I'm paying for it. It's going to be VADA. So you can trust it, because you guys, you don't hear about it. You don't hear about positive drug tests unless it's VADA. 9 out of 10 times, right? It's VADA. It's not the state commission test. You're really fucking up if it's a state commission test, right? You gotta go off the rails, So it's like, okay, so I think VADA is an organization, is a brand, if you will, that we can trust. So you say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do extra testing for an extended period of time with VADA, and God willing, because I'm going to eat right, and I'm going to really watch what I put in my body. I'm going to come out clean. And at that time, I will return to the ring. Please forgive me. I'm sorry I let you down. I'll see you in 3 months. I'll see you in 6 months, whatever. And I think if that happened, guess what? There's still going to be a bunch of people shitting on him via social media, because that's what boxing Twitter is. But then they're going to move on. Like a couple days later, they're going to jump on somebody else. They're going to forget, and they're going to go on. But the way this went down, he's like this A-side privileged fighter. And you know how we were talking about Mauricio Lara going from nobody to somebody? this year, he went from the underdog to the lovable underdog to the guy who pulled the upset against Miguel Burchelt, and he was a hero, and now he's a zero. In the same year, he went, there's this big seesaw, you know what I mean? He had this high, and now he's got this low, and this low is lower than that high was high.
Right.
Like, because of this low, people are going to look at that high suspect. They're going to be like, yeah, you won, sure, but what were you on? You know what I mean? And his year is fucked. You know what I mean? And like people would still view him with suspicion. There are still going to be fans out there that will hate him because he's a Reynoso fighter. He's trained with Reynoso, right? There's folks who are going to hate him regardless, but I think there's a lot of people who are going to hate him now that would have forgave him had he pulled himself out, had he not relied on Pat English to come in there and, represent him. You know what I mean? I think it's telling when a fighter tests positive for something and the first thing they do is go to their lawyer, and they lawyer up, it doesn't go over well, whether they're innocent or not, But I think one thing going forward is fighters have to realize that there is no innocence with a positive test. That's not how you're going to be viewed.
Right.
You can't claim ignorance because we've heard it too many times before. We hear it too many times before. So, and listen, there's guys who slip through the cracks. And right now, I'll tell you, there's a debate going on. It's not really a debate. It's more of a discussion. Like, do we drop him from the rankings? Because the way we did it in the past is if you're suspended, if the commission suspends you or the sanctioning organization suspends you, then we drop you, right? Or we'd drop you if you actually fight while under the influence, so to speak. If you fight with a performance-enhancing drug in your system, whether or not the commission overturns the decision, if you won, right? We're dropping you from the rankings. And if you won the ring title the way Louis Neri did when he beat Shinsuke Yamanaka, we're like, no, we're not. You're not winning our title like that. There was, whether you knew it or not, you performed that night with the performance-enhancing drug in your system. It wasn't fair. It wasn't an even playing field. You had help making weight, and you had a drug in your system that makes you strong, and increases your stamina. So you don't win a title under those circumstances. But we wouldn't drop a fighter if the fighter tested positive prior to the fight. We wouldn't drop them from the rankings unless until there was an investigation, until there was the commission says, okay, we looked at this and the fight's off and you're suspended, right? Or we're taking your license, whatever. But guys get in, there's loopholes, you know what I mean? And Billy Joe Saunders stayed in our rankings after he tested positive for a banned substance prior to the Andrade fight. Who was it? Dillian White did too. Dillian White tested positive. And it was weird. His case was very strange. It was very convoluted. I think I don't think he failed a VADA test. I think he failed an UCAD test. And then UCAD said, oh, we're wrong, or it wasn't enough, or it was our findings is consistent with contamination or whatever. But it was funky. I mean, I remember there being people saying, drop that sucker from the rankings. And we didn't do it because there was an investigation involved, right? And he didn't, and he wasn't, he wasn't dropped from our rankings, And with Saunders, really, I think Saunders should have been dropped, but Saunders didn't get suspended by the commission that had jurisdiction over that Andrade fight because there's a loophole. He hadn't been licensed by them yet.
It was Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, it was Massachusetts. Yeah, I think the fight was going to be in Boston. And so we're like, okay, we'll wait for the WBO for their, they're going to make a ruling on it. But then he voluntarily abdicated his belt. So he got around it, right? Yeah. So there was maneuverings and, is that right? So, I mean, obviously we got to look at our own criteria and like, okay, what do we do? Do we just put forth a zero tolerance? And it seems like, I think that the public would like that the best. The only problem I have with that is that the only time we're seeing any of these, generally speaking, not always, but like, let's say 9 out of 10 times or 8 out of 10 times. Okay. The majority of the positive tests are VADA tests, right? And most of these guys aren't being VADA tested. So it's like the folks who are going to pop dirty, who are going to wind up with a positive test, they're the ones who are, it's that minority that's, voluntarily undergoing VADA testing. But what about all these other people who are just sneaking through the regular commission test or lesser anti-doping agencies? It's like they're not being penalized, but I don't know. It's fucked up. The drug testing situation in boxing is very bad. It's fucked up. It's the biggest. There's it falls under fighter safety. So I'll just say that's the biggest issue, and that's the best reason to have some sort of overseeing governmental centralized commission that oversees all of boxing. It's like, let's say in the country, in the United States, it's really it's the fighter safety. It's the fact that fighters can get knocked out in one jurisdiction and then travel overseas or travel to another state or travel to another country and fight after having been knocked out, you know what I mean? And subject themselves to, potentially fatal damage, like that 18-year-old girl who died in Canada, in Montreal.
Right.
And then beyond that, there's the drug testing, and you would think, I would be all for a national commission if that was the main thing it oversaw, was drug testing and just fighter safety. I don't even care. I mean, it would be great if they could run it like a league and have rankings that everybody could trust and agree on that would result in mandatory challenging for the real title and have things, play out like football, you know what I mean? But if we couldn't do that, I would be satisfied with a national commission solely overseeing drug testing, because it's that bad. It's that fucked up.
Right. Yeah, we've been in contact for a couple months now, even prior to this whole Oscar Valdez things, with the chairman of VADA, Dr. Margaret Goodman. So she's been in contact with us. We've been trying to get her scheduled to work around to do an episode here, because we've had.
Oh, you should. Yeah, her voice needs to be heard. Yeah, I posted a statement that she wrote up today on ringtv.com, and it's I didn't couch. She didn't couch it. She didn't make it solely about the Oscar Valdez situation. Although I think that was the catalyst, or the straw that broke the camel's back, to where she wanted to be very clear about to the public what VADA's role is. But also, she included in that statement her thoughts on stimulants and why the drug that Valdez tested positive for was on their ban list. But I do think, it does behoove the boxing community, and that includes the fans, to really educate themselves, not on every drug. That's impossible, man. You could devote the next 10 years and not be an expert like Victor Conti is an expert. You know what I mean? But you should know the different categories of drugs, in particular the performance enhancers. You should know those categories. You should go to the VADA site, vadatesting.org, and you should download, the list of their what's prohibited, their prohibited substance list, and you should familiarize yourself with all the forms, with the commissions, USADA if they have one, definitely with VADA, and look at what the fighter is supposed to fill out. and what they're supposed to divulge, and know this, so that when fighters say, oh, I didn't know, you could say, nah, whatever you're taking, you're supposed to let them know. Did you let them know? You know what I mean? And if you had any question, because the thing you got to ask yourself with Valdez is, all right, you took herbal tea that you feel is all natural, but why do you need to take it? Can you not make 130 pounds without taking this tea or without doing something, without taking some kind of putting something into your body apart from water and just, the regular food that you eat? Can you not make 130 pounds without supplements, right? That's a question right there. And then if the question is no, I got to take this stuff, you got to ask yourself why. Like, okay, if you can't make 130, why aren't you fighting at 135? Because I think that question, it brings in another part of this issue in that fighters aren't really fighting at their natural weight just because of previous day weigh-ins, right? Mm-hmm. Fighters have at least 24 hours, if not 30 or 35 hours between the weigh-in and the fight. So somebody like Oscar Valdez, who began his career as a featherweight, and is pretty much like a natural featherweight, and he's fighting at 130 now. If he's struggling to make 130, he's reluctant to go to 135 because he looks at the guys who are making 135 and he's like, that dude is a welterweight. That dude is a welterweight who can make 135. And those guys are probably taking stuff that aids them in boiling their big giant frames down. You look at Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia, they're huge, man. And trust me, they're weighing in at 135. They're not fighting at 135. So nobody's fighting at their natural weight. And by the way, I'm not saying that Lopez, Haney, or Garcia are doing anything illegal. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying because of the weigh-in situation, the official weigh-in being the day before, I'm saying guys, because when you're young, you can boil yourself down. 100% natural. And these guys are all young. They can boil themselves down to an unnatural weight. But then you got guys who, they reach a certain age and they can't do it naturally, right? And they're like, okay, I'm going to need some help. I'm going to need methods or whatever, whether it's sweat out methods or whatever. I'm going to need some help doing that. And in their mind, they might think, this tea I'm taking, it's helping me do it. It's helping me sweat it out. And I'm catching a buzz when I'm working out. I'm feeling some energy. This is good. I'm not doing drugs. I'm not sticking a needle into my body, right? Like in their minds, they might think that, but they got to get educated. You know what I mean? And everybody else has to get educated. And like, no, there's, even in over-the-counter stuff, even in like vitamin supplements, multivitamins or whatever, there could be stuff in there that is it's an unfair advantage that you're having if the other guy's not doing it.
Right.
Yeah. And the answer is not opening the floodgates saying, everybody do whatever you want to do. Not in a combat sport. You know what I mean? Maybe suggest that for track and field just because you want to see just how far they can jump or how fast they can run, whatever. I still think that's fucked up, but in combat sport, no, you can't do that because people get hurt and people die. And right. You can't aid that. You can't aid and knowingly aid in the physical damage that these fighters heap upon themselves. And even if they're willing to do it,
right,
sometimes the fighter has to be saved from themselves, right? Like that 18-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah, that was unfortunate.
Yeah. From Mexico. She needed to be saved from herself because she didn't care. She was like, I was knocked out in my last fight, but I don't care. I want to take this fight. It was the wrong thing.
Right. It
was a mismatch. It shouldn't have happened. And that fighters have to be saved from themselves. And
right.
Boxing has to be saved from itself too, because boxing is it's such a business. The business comes before the sport, and everybody is such a hustler, and everybody's so desperate. Like people in boxing, even if they're rich, man, people in boxing have got like a street hustler mentality. Mm-hmm. Where they're like, let's get this money, let's get it, let's go and get it. However, and they're not scrupulous. They're not they're not thinking like rational human beings, man. They're not, they're just like, yo, it's the money's there. Let's do it. Let's get through this and get on to the next thing or whatever. And you can't, it can't be allowed to operate that way because people get hurt. It's show business and it's a business, but it's not like these aren't actors. You know what I mean? These aren't actors. This stuff isn't scripted. The punches are real. And a lot of these folks, these fighters come from very desperate backgrounds, very poor backgrounds. And they're, they got that mentality. Like you used to hear from the rappers, right? Yo, get rich or die trying. They got that. They say shit like that. And that shit's internalized and like, no, I'm going to make it no matter what, but even if they have that mentality, they can't be allowed to throw their lives away.
Right.
Because it'll ultimately kill the sport as a legitimate sport.
Right.
It'll make the sport like a renegade sport. It'll be like, we'll have to go underground the way mixed martial arts was when it first started. We don't want that. And it was like that, a century ago. It was like that. It was illegal.
Right.
And crazy shit happened.
Yeah, of course.
Like really fucked up shit went on in those days, and it wasn't right, Yeah, it was very unfortunate, especially for the young lady, like you mentioned, in Montreal. So obviously we send our thoughts to her and her family and friends, because that was a very unfortunate situation that just happened. This upcoming Saturday, Triller comes back in an event that was supposed to be headlined by the Golden Boy himself, Oscar De La Hoya. Unfortunately, he tested positive for COVID. Do you have an update on that, on him and his condition? No, I hope he's okay. I saw him last Monday, and he looked and sounded great. They had like a little media gathering at the Golden Boy headquarters in downtown LA, and they had food and all. And it was just a handful of reporters, writers, editors, whatever. And he looked good. He looked like he's really been training. He's good spirits, his face looked good and all. And it sucks. I think he was doing a lot of media, a lot of PR, a lot of, they had done the media workout and all, but he was on this real circuit of really pushing that. And he may have shaken one too many hands or talked close to one too many people without a mask or whatever. And, and he was vaccinated too. So it's a cautionary tale. It sucks. But hopefully he makes he recovers soon and he can get back to training and they can reschedule it. I don't know if it'll be the same fight because Belfort's going to fight on, and it's Evander Holyfield who's stepped into the void, so to speak, which is weird. I see people kind of like, they don't like it because Holyfield's age, 58, but it's weird for me. And I might be out of my mind. This fight makes a little more sense because both guys are heavyweights. And one thing I couldn't quite wrap my head around was, Oscar's, he's older now, he's pushing 50 himself, he's 48, but he, he's walking around, he was walking around at like 190 or 180 or whatever. And he was like, he was like a light heavyweight, but he's not a light heavyweight. You know what I mean? We know this as a boxer, he really hit his ceiling at junior middleweight, over 154 pounds. He just wasn't the same. Right. And so I thought it was weird that he was of all the MMA guys out there that he was fighting Belfort, who's a big dude. He's an MMA light heavyweight, which is like 205 pounds. Yeah. And he's a big dude. I mean, he's a muscled up guy. And I remember seeing Belfort at the LA Boxing Club sparring with heavyweights, back when he was, only known among hardcore MMA aficionados. This is before the rise of Zuffa-owned UFC. And he had hands. He didn't have a great chin, but those were heavyweights that were hitting him. I mean, I'm talking about him sparring with, like Layman Brewster or, a super badass like James Toney or, young guys. There was a Mexican-American heavyweight out of Orange County named Javier Mora. who he would spar a lot with. And Mora, occasionally, they would go back and forth. They would light each other up. But and Mora was just a teenager, and I think still an amateur, as a matter of fact. But, the fact of the matter is, Belfort was a heavyweight in boxing, sparring with legit heavyweights, So the De La Hoya matchup seemed weird to me, that he was in there with a guy that big. And at least with Holyfield, I know he's been training. I mean, he's a heavyweight. He's an all-time great heavyweight. Arguably, I think he's top 10. Arguably top 5, just looking at who he fought, And obviously, he's light years away from his prime, but he's still Holyfield. You know what I mean? In the last couple of fights he had, he moves slow as hell, but he still has his foundation, still has his fundamentals and all. So it's weird, but I kind of, call me a sicko. I will watch it. You know what I mean? Yeah. What else do we have on Saturday? I don't think,
David Hayes on that card, Anderson Silva's on that card.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I'm not into the David Hay. Right. No offense to David Hay, I love him. I think it's awesome.
Mike was saying just before you came on for this week's episode, Dougie, that Holyfield, when he retired, I think there was, Mike, would you say that he couldn't pass like the medical exams or something like that?
Yeah, isn't that right, Dougie? When he retired, he was struggling to get. Because I remember he took that period off, didn't he, when he had the bad heart, and then I think some of the states with his age.
Right. No, there were some commissions that took away his license. I think the New York State Commission did that after his loss to Larry Donald. And I'm not second guessing that. They were just looking out for him. They were like, you don't have it anymore, and you should retire. And they were also looking at their liability. Like, if he does have a heart ailment, he shouldn't be fighting. And obviously there were other commissions that were like, hey, come fight in our state, come fight in Texas or whatever. And, there was a string of losses that he had where he was in with the worst possible styles that he could face. He was in there with like Chris Bird. He was in there with James Toney. And even though he was a big favorite over Toney, it was James Toney.
Yeah.
Tony's he had combinations that no other heavyweight could drop on Holyfield. And then there was Larry Donald, who was a modern-sized heavyweight, who was a stick and move specialist. Just jab, move, right hand, rinse and repeat. But when he stepped in there against second-tier and third-tier heavyweights who came to fight, he looked good, I'm trying to think if there was an Italian heavyweight that he got in there with. Was it Lou Savarese? Might have been more than a few kind of Italian-American kind of heavyweights. They were just, Vinny Matalone, maybe. I don't know. Let me. I gotta look up his.
Box freak?
Yeah, hold on.
He had that close decision with Valuev as well, didn't he?
Right, and he didn't embarrass himself against Valuev. In fact, there were people who thought he won that fight. I didn't bother watching it. Both guys were moving super slow. But I think when he stepped down from world-class competition, it was back-to-back Italian-American dudes in Texas, right? Vinny Matalone in Corpus Christi, Texas, and Lou Savarese in El Paso. And that was 2007. He looked good. I mean, he looked okay. He didn't look like a shot fighter against those guys, right?
Right.
But then he fights Sultan Ibragimov, who, just outclassed him. Valuev, he was competitive with. And then after that, he fought Franz Botha, another guy who was long in the tooth, and stopped him. And then Sherman Williams. Then Brian Nielsen in Denmark was his last fight. That was 2011.
Right.
So 10 years ago. Now, here's the thing. I haven't heard that he had been, rejected by any commission in between. That could have happened, though. I haven't heard about him failing any kind of medical exams. That wouldn't shock me, but I haven't heard that. Michael, if you know otherwise, let me know. Maybe I should not watch this fight. But it's weird when this fight was announced, that he was gonna sub for Oscar. I was kind of thinking, he's probably slow as molasses, but I know, and I know Belfort's pretty quick, but Holyfield is an all-time great boxer, and Belfort is like a Hall of Fame mixed martial artist. He's not a great boxer. He's not even a good boxer.
He's a well-known PED user as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's questions about Evander Holyfield too.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's questions about Evan Fields.
It's true.
Oh, true. Yeah, the name that's on the package.
Yeah.
Like you said, every prominent gym has at least one of them.
Which is Evans the name of his kid.
Yeah,
I know he named his son Evan.
Yeah, he did. He did name his kid. That's true. That's true. But also, I guess what's getting more attention, at least as of today, for this Triller event, was that former President Donald Trump will be.
Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah. What was your reaction?
I saw that tweet. I saw that somebody tweeted it. I'm like, I thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, listen.
It's marketing, right? I mean, they're getting some type of audience there. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. It's not like Trump doesn't have his fans.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Yeah.
And we know they're loyal. I mean, they're like crazy loyal. Like, it's interesting. And the thing is Donald, he does have his history with combat sports.
Yeah.
Primarily boxing, but I think a little bit with mixed martial arts too. So yeah, it's bizarro world. It really is. It's a circus, but I mean, that's kind of what Triller has been sort of banking on.
Yeah.
Marketing, with their shows. So
well, I think they obviously De La Hoya in and of himself was a draw. He was gonna, of course, get a lot of people tuning in because they wanted to see. Oh, I wonder what he looks like now. Kind of like a Mike Tyson-esque. And then they lost him, so they needed. They needed something to bring people back in, and I think that's the reason they brought in Trump.
Sure, listen, I think Trump will bring. He'll give him a lot of ink, so to speak. He'll give him a lot of press. He will bring in. I'm not sure. I think you have to select that commentary. I don't think it's like the.
It's like an alternative.
Yeah, I don't think they're bringing Trump in to sit next to Jim Lampley, who, by the way, just Jim Lampley calling this show. That I think Lampley actually brings some curiosity. He might. There are Lampley fans out there.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm a Lampley fan. And I think Evander Holyfield has his fans. I think Vitor has his fans as well. I don't know. I have no idea how the pay-per-view will go. I do have this kind of sicko curiosity about it. For some reason, I'm thinking Holyfield and Belfort will be competitive. I don't know what it's going to look like. I can't conceive that. Because I don't watch MMA. I don't watch UFC. I've never seen a Belfort fight in its entirety. I've seen highlights of him knocking guys out pretty quick.
Right.
I saw one fight where he ran across the cage and took a guy out in like 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because at that time, this was years ago, he was considered a faded fighter. He was considered done. And this was like 10 years ago. And I remember thinking, man, the guy can still punch. My knowledge of Belfort comes from literally watching him spar at the LA Boxing Club in downtown Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And being okay, looking okay, but having a shaky chin. So I don't know. Holyfield was known for having a great chin, and he's a great fighter. But he's pushing 60. He's getting close to 60. He's closer to 60 than he is 50. And you do have to ask yourself, with combat sports, should there be a cutoff age?
Right.
And I remember Bernard Hopkins, one of my all-time faves. People were asking me about his last fight against, over and over again in the mailbag, Joe Smith Jr. And I said, listen, Hopkins has forgotten more about boxing than Joe Smith will ever learn. He should, on paper, conceivably, he should be able to outbox him, just outclass him. But here's the thing. He's 51 or 52.
Right.
and Smith can punch. And Smith's a legit contender. And I wrote this over and over again in answers, replies to mailbag emails. And that was, after the age of 50, all bets are off. Doesn't matter how great you are or how great you were. Talking about, especially combat sports, but any sort of athletic pursuit. And I can speak from personal experience, 51 is a lot different than 41. Yeah. 41 is a lot different than 30. There's a big difference between being in your 40s and how your body reacts and how your body recovers and all that. And 50s is, I've just stepped my big toe into 50s.
Yeah.
Big difference, man. If I have a good workout, I told you I had a good workout on Sunday. I still feel it.
Right.
I didn't work out yesterday, and I'm not working out tonight.
Were you at the track on Sunday?
No. I was hitting the bag. I was hitting the bag and doing some weights, And the heaviest weight I'll do is like 25 pounds, and shoot, I'm sore from that. Like, yeah. I can't do that. I can't do that back to back. I can't work the heavy bag hard.
Right.
I feel great, but I feel it everywhere. I feel it all through my body. So I don't know. I don't want to. I mean, I can't even conceive of the wear and tear on Holyfield's body.
Right.
His boxing career and the fact that he's 58 years old. So who knows what he has left.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be like you said, it's kind of like a circus kind of with the whole show thing. Yeah. They just
show. It's like, hey, come in this tent. What's in this tent?
Yeah.
The missing link. The missing link. What's that look like? You got to go in there. You got to pay, and you got to go in there and see for yourself.
Yeah, so definitely, people are going to be very intrigued to, especially with Trump being announced as being there, and like you said, he has his loyal fan base, so
he does.
They're going to pop in and see what he has to say, and even though he's going to be talking boxing, we'll see. We will see, and we'll talk about it obviously next week in our following episode. But we appreciate Dougie once again for you. Lending your knowledge and expertise on the world of boxing here on The Last Round. Again, we appreciate you coming on. Before we let you go, obviously, go ahead and tell people all your stuff, where they can find your work, your Twitter.
You can follow me on Twitter at Dougie Fischer. Dougie is spelled Dougie. Fischer is Fischer. Same handle with Instagram. Follow me there. And you can find me in the pages of Ring Magazine and at our official website, ringtv.com.
What are we looking at? Yeah, what are we looking forward to in the next edition or the next couple editions? Anything big?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't. We have in this year's cycle, we have 3 more magazines. I won't tell you what we're working on for the December issue, but it's like a mythical matchup. The cover story is like a mythical matchup between 2 all-time greats. One of them is still alive, the other one isn't. It's like one of the all-time, like they're both incredible talent boxers, but one of them, the one who's still alive, was a savage, great guy now, and the one who's no longer with us was an amazing, super slick ring general wizard. And the magazine after that one, January 2022, which will come out like late October, early November, that's going to be another special issue, and a really popular fighter, a fighter that is just beloved by his people and his culture. And but I'm going to keep that quiet. And then the magazine after that is I'll say this: the fighter that our next special issue is going to be about is every bit beloved by his people and culture as Julio Cesar Chavez, who's the subject of our last special issue.
Oh wow!
Beloved by Mexican people.
I have 2 subscriptions.
Awesome. And so after the February 2022 issue is our 100th anniversary issue. So that's going to be an oversized issue. That's going to be a very special issue. And we've got some very special things planned for that. And obviously that'll be on sale in the month of December and January.
Sweet. Yeah, that 100 years is the one where I remember you've been talking about it for fun.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, 1922, right? That's when.
Yes. So February 2022 is the month of the 100-year anniversary of Ring Magazine being in publication.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, that's definitely going to be a big milestone for you guys. So once again, Dougie, we definitely appreciate your time here on the last round. Mike, as we sign off here, go ahead and let our listeners know where they can find us and follow us.
Well, at the last round 12 on Instagram and Twitter, and be sure to join us next week to review and preview all the fights.
So once again, for our special guest of the week, the editor-in-chief of the Ring Magazine, Dougie Fischer, for my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is the last round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round